Welcome back, fight fans. This video is brought to you by AB Combat. These knockouts required very little follow-up, a selection of one-hitter quitters that truly did leave an impact. Here are 10 brutal one-shot knockouts in MMA history. Mark Hunt versus Roy Nelson. This battle of legendary power punchers was always going to produce a highlight reel moment. But even with that billing in mind, it was still pretty shocking to see just how impressive Mark Hunt's finish of Roy Nelson was. As the king of the walk-off KO, the Super Samoan did not need much of an opening to find a home for his massive uppercut. And when you've spent an entire career knocking out fighters with devastating punches, you're going to know when a shot has done the job. And as soon as Hunt's uppercut connected, he pretty much understood that the job was done. Gabriel Gonzaga versus Mirko Cro Cop. How do you deal with fighting the single most deadly head kicker in the history of MMA? Well, if you're Gabriel Gonzaga, taking a leaf out of Mirko Cro Cop's book was clearly the best option. Instead of playing to his own strength, Gonzaga simply decided to steal his opponent's, flattening the legendary Croatian fighter with a hammer blow to the side of the head. Seriously, this was one of the greatest head kicks you'll ever see. Oh my God! A shot that Cro Cop himself would have been proud of, if you know he wasn't on the receiving end of it. Yuri Prochazka versus Dominic Reyes. The former UFC light heavyweight champion, Yuri Prochazka, may be on the long road to recovery. But even with the 205-pound division's belt now under the control of Jamahal Hill, let's not forget that Yuri never actually lost his title. And despite having just 3 fights under the UFC banner, Prochazka's collection of huge moments is incredibly impressive. When he took on Dominic Reyes in the riveting title eliminator, Prochazka set a pace that caused the 2-time title challenger to noticeably wilt. And after unloading a barrage on him up against the cage, Yuri overshot an elbow on purpose, only to then use that momentum to set up a spinning elbow. It was a brutal shot, an incredibly artistic piece of striking from this Czech samurai. Kelvin Gastelum versus Michael Bisping. This next one was just plain unfortunate. After a fight night headliner between Kelvin Gastelum and Anderson Silva was cast into jeopardy following an injury to the Spider, Michael Bisping, who had just lost to Jorge St. Pierre 3 weeks prior, decided to step up and save the headliner. And so, the Count made one final walk to the cage to take on the in-form Gastelum. But as it turned out, this was a truly terrible idea. Kelvin KO'd him in the first round with a beautiful 1-2 shot, ending his career there and then. The intention here from Bisping was all good, but man, this was a devastating way to have your time in the fight game come to a close.
Back, catches him with a counter. Look, here's the right hand that comes, slips out, catches him with the lead hand, and then bam!
Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman. You know you'd see it in here eventually. One-shot knockouts don't come much cleaner than this. And even if Leon Edwards' head kick KO of Kamaru Usman took place on the prelims in a small, inconsequential fight, it would still be one hell of a finish. But when you add in all of that context, man, this was an all-timer. Down on the scorecards, seemingly mentally beaten, Leon managed to pull out the Hail Mary to end all Hail Marys, connecting cleanly on the chin of the pound-for-pound king to earn UFC welterweight gold in the process. As pretty a head kick finish as the Octagon has ever known, and the reaction from Kamaru says it all. The dude took a short trip to the Shadow Realm with this one, folks.
Cloth from which he is cut.
Yair Rodriguez versus Chan Sung Jung. Speaking of Hail Mary KOs, Yair Rodriguez may well have pulled off the most insane finish in UFC history in the dying embers of his clash with Chan Sung Jung. With just 1 second on the clock, Yair managed to land a technique that most fighters wouldn't even think of, a ducking upward elbow that was designed specifically to counter the Korean Zombie's wild forward movement. Most people who watched this one live had absolutely no idea what had happened. 1 second, Young was up and fighting, and the next, he was face down on the mat, totally unconscious. Not only was the latest KO victory in UFC history a 4:59 round of 5, but there's an argument to be made that it's the single most unique shot we've ever seen attempted, never mind landed.
Oh my God! What an elbow from Yair Rodriguez from our angle, guys. I don't mean to have...
Justin Gaethje versus James Vick. Justin Gaethje is known primarily for his love of a long, drawn-out slugfest. But if you give him an opening and you don't have the chin to stand up to his power, you'd best believe he's going to take advantage. And for James Vick, who talks so much trash to Gaethje in the build-up to their fight, he was made to eat his words very early on. As soon as Justin pressured him up against the fence, the huge knockout blow was not far behind. A brutal knockout from the highlight. Edson Barboza versus Terry Etim. Up next, we have a bona fide classic, courtesy of the great Edson Barboza. As reliable a finisher as the Octagon has seen in years, Barboza could always be counted on to deliver the goods in a firefight. But his greatest moment of all undoubtedly came in his 3-round fight of the night-winning showcase against Terry Etim. Ahead on the scorecards, you could understand a scenario where Barboza didn't feel too obligated to pursue the finish. He was already going to win the fight. So why bother taking any risks? Well, that certainly isn't the type of fighter Edson Barboza is. And as soon as he had the space, he unloaded perhaps the single most perfectly spinning wheel kick ever seen in the UFC, landing clearly on Etim's chin for a highlight that still has no equal in the sport. Michael Chandler versus Tony Ferguson. This one was all kinds of sad. Fans of Tony Ferguson were forced to watch their hero's decline play out over the course of a very harrowing series of fights. Tony never truly recovered from the beating he took at the hands of Justin Gaethje, but after a pair of poor showings against Charles Oliveira and Benel Dariush, it seemed like the old El Cocoy was making an appearance in the opening round against Michael Chandler. But then, out of nowhere, Chandler landed the most powerful front kick imaginable, sparking the lightweight legend here and then. Francis Ngannou versus Alistair Overeem. If you're looking for a contender for the hardest single punch ever landed in the UFC, then Francis Ngannou's uppercut finish of Alistair Overeem is probably taking the cake. This punch damn near took the famed kickboxer off his feet, and while the follow-up shot was also pretty nasty, judging by the impact of the first one, it was in no way necessary. Francis has a level of power that still doesn't seem real, and if he never does fight in the UFC again, it will truly be a shame. Thanks for watching, fight fans. We'll be back soon.